All right. Welcome back, everybody. You are spending the day with the Cherie Blair Foundation for Women. We're looking at women entrepreneurs and how we do mean business, and we're not going to wait for equality. And I can see some extraordinary women on my screen, and it's great to be here with all of you. We just heard from Hillary Clinton, from Cherie herself. And let me now introduce our panel this afternoon as we look at what's the best way to break down gender stereotypes and how they seek to inhibit us, both conscious and subconscious bias. So let me start by introducing first Ngozi Oiwole. She's the founder and MD of Noxy Limited, which manufactures furniture, office furniture in Nigeria. Welcome. I can also see Fumzile Naguka, the former Undersecretary General of the United Nations there. Welcome to the program. Also welcoming this afternoon Amy Stursberg, who is, of course, the Executive Director of the Blackstone Charitable Foundation. And finally, Helen McEachern, who is the Cherie Blair Foundation CEO. Welcome, everybody. Let me start with you, if I may, Fumzile. You really, in a sense, grew UN Women into the veritable force that it is today. If I had to ask you how much or how little has changed over these years, what would you say?
Good afternoon, and thank you so much for having me. We have grown in UN Women by networking and partnering with a lot of people. I think our greatest claim to sort of expanding ourselves is the things that we've done with others outside the UN. I was very deliberate that the UN Women must not be confined within the United Nations. That the United Nations was not a place where we were supposed to serve women. Women in the United Nations were just a tiny little fraction of the women we wanted to be relevant to. But our purpose was to go out in leaps and bounds and be out there in society. And we also needed allies to assist us outside the United Nations. So the one thing that I took away from me when I left with UN Women, which I was really happy about, was how much we had managed to take our message, to partner, to collaborate with many people outside the United Nations who are not the traditional easy suspects, for the women's agenda. But in terms of where we have not grown, we can actually still grow in the UN. This is one place where you still get a major document on many important issues that the UN deals with, and you cannot find the word woman anywhere in the document. We have to be there to ask the questions for them to go back and revise the memo and then bring women into the fold. And I think the stereotype there is that these issues that people deal with are not women's issues. So you don't have to put women. Or if you talk about people, this is understood to include women. And we know that it doesn't. Many changes and developments have happened in the UN, but we still have to push much further. We have to remind them all over again that women are there.
I mean, as I was saying in my conversation with Hillary Clinton, it is actually a lifelong project. It never actually stops. Every day brings a new stereotype. Amy, if I were to ask you the same question, how do we fight the stereotypes that others define us by, but sometimes that we are also socialized into defining ourselves by. And those are often the toughest ones, because, we're all to varying degrees products of a patriarchal culture, including the most enlightened, accomplished women.
Well, thanks so much anyway for concluding me today. And this is something that I'm passionate about. And I want to just build on what the doctor just said, which is that, I think, Blackstone Charitable Foundation focuses on supporting student entrepreneurs. That's kind of our signature program. And what we've realized over time, a decade-long program that we're focused on, which is entrepreneurs on college campuses. It was originally for all students who wanted to start their companies in a safe
Student
environment of their
entrepreneurs.
colleges. But the interesting thing that we found, and I think what's related to what you're asking, is that when you went onto college campuses that were half women, people of color, if you went into the program that we had called the Blackstone Launchpad, the majority of the people in the room starting their companies, having the courage to walk into the room, were men. And why was that? What were the barriers to access? And I think the point that was just made is that it's our own issue, right? It's all about its allies, its mentors, it's about giving back. It's like, how do you create, and sometimes it sounds so cliche, but how do you create a supportive community for women to sort of break those barriers down of actually, in our case, it's actually a physical incubator. But you could think about it metaphorically, like what are the barriers to entry? And I think the barriers to entry are really a supportive community. If you mentor with other women, no matter whether you're an entrepreneur or in other cases, that's the support that you're giving them, where you're telling them how to break down barriers, how to take those. I was listening to the session before this where Cherie Blair was asking the question of an entrepreneur from Nigeria. I'm blanking on her name. And she was talking about how you wrap yourselves around the support networks that you need, whether it's mentors, whether it's kind of, getting support from other communities. And so I think giving back, having role models, having mentors, and really taking that seriously and intentionally is what can actually sort of be a game changer.
Let me follow through with one more question to you, Amy. One of the things that a lot of women who otherwise make no apology for their assertion or aggression find themselves confronted with is talking about money. I've lost count of the number of women who are able to get over our inhibition, who we still say our work will speak for us. We want our work to speak for us. We want our work to draw attention to itself. Given that Blackstone, and you personally actually disperse, millions of dollars in capital to help women entrepreneurs, how would you encourage women to get over this one very gendered inhibition that we have?
Well, again, these answers sometimes seem a little trite, but I think one person at a time. I mean, Blackstone is a firm, but also even the Launchpad, we're very focused on actually not just women, but sort of underserved communities. Again, whether it's women, people of color, people from other under-resourced communities. And I think, just across the board in terms of the work that Blackstone does, sort of reaching out to women. For example, this is a small example, but it's the same thing. I think it's something that women don't want to talk about, right? Money, but it's also careers that women don't want to go into. It's not a natural thing. So one of the things that Blackstone does as a firm is it goes into colleges, and this is not related to the foundation, but it goes into colleges around the world and identifies women who might, if they knew about it, understand careers in finance, for example. Whereas you could, and giving them the sort of the tools and the knowledge and the education to understand that they might, as a math major, an engineering major, or whatever, an English major, maybe you actually have the skill set to go into finance. And I think if you look at things, and then even again, the foundation, what we've decided is we had this program for a decade called the Launchpad that was just, as I said, servicing students in general. And what we realized is the students that needed the most, and it wasn't just to start their companies, it was entrepreneurial skills, which is related to your question. Entrepreneurial skills about leadership, about public speaking, competencies that you need to be an entrepreneur are also competencies that you need for 21st century jobs, whether you're going to go work at a Blackstone, whether you're going to go work in the UN. I mean, if you listen to what Dr. spoke about before about the UN, like people, going into those places, you have to be innovative and entrepreneurial and think about where are the gaps and what are you going to bring to the table. And as a woman, I think a lot of it relates around how we talk about women, how we include women, how we mentor women, how we give them access, even if it's at Blackstone, to the knowledge to know about jobs and finance. So I wouldn't be so specific about how women don't talk about finances personally, but it's really about sort of opening up the funnel to talk about finance, to be into the finance world. I mean, there are very few women in the finance world comparatively at the senior levels. And so I think it's across the board, and I think it's kind of one person, one program, one company at a time.
Yeah. Ngozi, I want your lived experience of actually starting your own business. What hurdles you faced? You run you're an entrepreneur, manufacturing office furniture. When you started, there are some challenges that any entrepreneur would face, irrespective of gender, and there are some that are specific to being female. Can you talk about the second and your own journey?
Yeah, it's nice to be here. And I've listened to Doctor, I've listened to Amy, and truthfully, the impact of gender, I'm a little bit under the weather, I've got a cold, so I really hope that I'll still make
You sound
some impact.
fine. You sound absolutely fine. Go ahead.
So the impact of gender stereotyping on women is evident irrespective of the level of position women belong to in the organization. So stereotypes have emerged in my career as an entrepreneur as a way of justifying the status quo and a response to social identity, which I always tell myself that it's not intentionally adopted, especially in the think manager, think male association, which is attenuated in the case of successful companies. And then think crisis, think female is being noticed, with female leaders. I had a situation. I needed to restructure my finances in the loan repayment department of a bank. And the manager said, "Did you come with your husband?" When I said no, he asked again if the man standing behind me came with me. And I said no. Well, I let him know that I'm not a token female by showing him that I possess leadership ability with knowledge of my business. Even though I'm affectionate, helpful, friendly, kind, and sympathetic, as well as personally sensitive, I had everything he was looking for in a man when the negotiation started. He took me for granted. He was unprepared, and I got away with a better rate than I had anticipated. Well, it did affect me, but like I said, he did not expect me to have the technical and rational.
So you converted bias into advantage.
Yes, because he wasn't expecting what I knew. He wasn't expecting that I had the technical and rational expertise, and something that is acceptable with attributes which are perceived as masculine, but operating in a female-dominated space like furniture manufacturing. I quenched all that gender-related perceptions and biases.
But good for you. Good for you. But Helen, I think we all want to get to the point where we don't have to do that. Like, hurrah for Ngozi that she was able to take the patronizing assumptions that someone had about her and convert them into her own advantage. And I've heard similar anecdotes from other female friends. But the relationship between women, ambition, and power is possibly where the maximum number of stereotypes reside. The way we imagine powerful women to be. Basically, people in society don't like women with power. And Hillary was telling me earlier that she has this Eleanor Roosevelt quote that for a successful woman you have to develop a skin as thick as the hide of a rhinoceros. I think the point is, we're all thick skinned, but why do we have to be?
No, why do we have to be? And is it the job of an individual woman entrepreneur, to develop a skin 2 or 3 times as thick as a man to overcome the stereotypes that they face? No, it's not. This is not about, it shouldn't be about every individual woman having to change herself. It's not about individual women. It's about a systemic issue. And that's why we are hosting this summit and why we have done this research, because this area of gender stereotypes in entrepreneurship is little understood, little researched, and we need to understand it's important to support women entrepreneurs to build their confidence, to build their skills, to increase their understanding of finance, to enable us to break down barriers like access to networks, access to markets for women entrepreneurs. But we have to look at the system that is holding them back, and we need to understand more about the stereotypes so we can do that together. It's complex, it's hard, it's long-term work, because it is, I think Chioma said with her conversation with Cherie earlier, that, you know, it is part of the patriarchy, and that is unfortunately a dominant system that we're working within. So we really need to look beyond individual women making themselves like rhinoceroses to be able to, as wonderful as the rhinoceros is, making themselves impenetrable to be able to get through this.
Yeah. Dr. Fumzile, you spoke about how the word women is sometimes missing from language. You know, language is a very, very big index of both conscious and subconscious bias. You know, how we talk about women, how we talk about, you know, the adjectives we use, both for, you know, for success and failure when it comes to women. And also, how do we not sexualize how women are spoken about in public spaces? A number of women speak about how criticism, even on social media about them, is in a highly sexualized sort of language that focuses on weight, color of skin, how they look, even the length of their hair, the clothes they wear, the kind of scrutiny that men are never subjected to.
Yes. The attitudes towards women, which in many cultures that we live in end up becoming a norm, are often not just about gender. They intersect with other variables that women have. There's a particular stereotype, for instance, about Black women. Black women are angry. Like hell, I'm angry, you know, but I'm not angry all the time. But I'm a generally potentially very angry person, and women with disability face a lot of discrimination as well. Not expected to be as entrepreneurial as women are, even when they have a disability that has nothing to do with what they want to achieve. We at UN Women, during the time when I was there, we started the Unstereotype Alliance, and we took the issue to the private sector to try and help and get them to help us to change the stereotypes through the way they market men and women, so that their adverts do not reinforce the stereotypes. It's been interesting to see how they have grown in the different countries that we have been able to form the groups. In fact, yesterday they just launched Unstereotype Alliance Australia. But interesting, in Brazil, for instance, they have seen that Black women, who are the majority of the population of women in Brazil, don't feature on TV. So they've just been eliminated in the Brazilian psyche of society through not making them visible. And our Unstereotype Alliance has taken that as an issue to raise so that we can give those women visibility. The Unstereotype Alliance in the UK at Christmas last year, Sainsbury had an advert which featured a Black family, and that generated a racist talk about Black women. And it took the other Unstereotype Alliance to affirm that type of advertising, ensuring that the race, the gender, and everything that that advert represents is seen in the positive light. I guess the major point I'm trying to make is that when you see something, say something. If we don't take these actions, we actually allow these to be the accepted norms in society, when we challenge them, even when we are not succeeding at the time when we're doing it, but we keep it out there in the public eye as a controversy. And it helps to have many other people not just accept it as a fait accompli, but as something that needs to be challenged.
Yeah, and I think it's really important that you made the point about intersectionality, because class, race, in my country, India, caste, all of this. And I think Amy was also speaking about marginalized, underrepresented communities. So it isn't just your gender, but how so many other layers of your life inform that gender experience. Amy, if I had to ask you, in your experience, you've met with and mentored so many women entrepreneurs. What is the most entrenched stereotype that actually holds women back?
I think it's that, well, I just want to say one thing in response to Dr. Fanzil, if I'm pronouncing your name correctly, is that I think public policy is so important and underestimated in these conversations. I think, Helen, you were kind of referencing it, but I think it's something that, I can't speak to, myself as an expert, but I think it's really important. I was reading something, preparing for this about 25%, I'm trying to find it, 25%, women spend 25% less time on their startups than men because of their role, their traditional family role. And then I happened to read another statistic in the paper yesterday about paternity leave and the impact paternity leave has on the sort of male brain and their kind of, how they bond or et cetera. Anyway, putting those two sort of simplistic facts together, I think thinking about the things in public policy that could actually impact the way that women can, what they can devote and how they can think about even that small thing about spending the amount of time, if they shared some of the, the role that they had in parenting, could actually be a game changer in terms of, how women could be and commit.
Can I jump in there, though? I always say that we talk so much about equality at work, but till there's equality at home, there can never truly be equality at work. And all of our conversations, the feminist discourse, has been focused on how to keep women in the workforce, how to create more equal spaces for them. But we don't actually talk about equality at home. And I remember Melinda Gates once telling me that one of the ways the Gates Foundation dealt with this is by saying that they would have family leave, just equal leave, whether they were men or women, so that it would encourage or it would de-gender some roles at home. So almost, Amy, to have more women, pursuing their dreams at work, you need a kind of de-gendering or a gender agnostic value system entering the home space.
Yeah, and I just think it's something that, obviously it's geographically, it's different in different places, but I just think in general, it's something to keep in mind. But just quickly to answer your other question, I mean, again, I think these barriers to entry are the thing that women, especially young women entrepreneurs, because that's the launch pad, and my exposure is really to women entrepreneurs and saying to them, is this, I think I don't know who, I think all of my other panelists sort of mentioned this, is that, not being able to have the confidence in your idea or your idea, to sort of speak out and, you have an idea. I mean, I was just down on a college campus recently and I bumped into a woman in the launch pad and she said, oh, well, those two guys, they have a much better idea than I have. And for me, the power of entrepreneurship is it's the great equalizer. It doesn't matter if you have a Harvard degree in engineering or you have no degree. If you have a great idea and you have the support around you, and obviously access to capital is important, all these things that you can't go without. But it doesn't matter who you are, where you come from, what your idea is. If you have a good idea and you have that support system around you. So once again, I think the greatest thing that I hear from women that just, again, seems somewhat simplistic is just a lack of confidence in their idea that they can do this. That they can actually, have an idea that might, if they got the right support, take off. That, to me, at least at a younger age, is the thing that I hear over and over and over again. When you get up to more senior entrepreneurs, I mean, recently Blackstone has invested in, interestingly enough, just for this conversation, I don't keep meaning to keep referencing Blackstone as a firm, but we have 3 new companies that they've, invested in and are majority owners in that are women-owned, businesses. Bumble, the dating app, Spanx, the whatever clothing company, and then Hello Sunshine, which is a a media company that Reese Witherspoon, but they made these major investments in these women entrepreneurs. And I've gotten so much incoming requests and questions, and from my entire network, whether it's personal, professional, wow, this is amazing. I mean, we don't see enough women who have success, whether it's going out there and speaking about it or getting the investors, right? And so I think, that's kind of what I think is the greatest sort of issue right now out there, is having the confidence in yourself.
And I guess, Ngozi, the problem with confidence is that some of us have had very powerful female mentors in our life, and we are therefore more confident, but not everybody. And I think Helen made that point, that individual aberrations cannot be how we map this journey. How has it been for you? Did you really have to fall back on mentors? Who gave you that encouragement? Who gave you the sort of heads up to have the confidence in your own idea?
Well, yes, actually, thankfully. I mean, I've listened to Amy speak and Kunzeli speak, and everybody just talked about realization, how they're shaped by intersectional factors such as age, ethnicity, and all that. And of course, we still haven't addressed the biggest thing in the house, the COVID-19, how it has affected gender stereotypes and so on. But I recognize all of these, sadly, but thankfully, with the great progress made, especially in encouraging women to start, sustain, and grow their businesses, which of course requires a more supportive entrepreneurial ecosystem, and increasing visibility of successful women entrepreneurs, just like Cherie Blair Foundation did for me, through the Enterprise Development Center, Nigeria. I mean, that can never be overemphasized. Such platforms, for me, has helped me to overcome the challenges that I've faced. The practical support, the mentoring are helpful. The Cherie Blair Foundation, had me on their social platforms because Amy was talking about advertising and stuff like that. This was a huge success as it deflected the cultural and ethnicity biases. So the media outing played a powerful role in shaping those gender stereotypes and norms for me. I also had I have a great family support. This is a huge relief because gender stereotypes is most commonly experienced from family members. So with this, my journey as an entrepreneur was smooth sailing. However, the major factor that helped me over the gender stereotypes I faced was the Road to Growth program by Cherie Blair Foundation. We call it R2G. It was an eye-opener for a whole new understanding to doing business. Getting the right collaboration to reach women was phenomenal, as they carefully picked experienced facilitators. The testimonials of other women, they sort of encourage you. They put the mentors, you listen to them, you're encouraged. What I learned there is like there are no shortcuts to your business, to do your business right. The only way to kill ignorance was not by fire, but by knowledge. So that's a lovely line. I dealt with that. Yes, that's how I dealt with it.
Knowledge, not fire. But sometimes, Helen, knowledge is not respected enough when you're a woman. That's why the term mansplaining, the number of, I was once just recently interviewing the chief scientist at the World Health Organization on COVID, and she happens to actually be from India, and she said, Dr. Soumya Swaminathan, and she said, I've lost count of the number of times I've been in a room and you have to actually, sort of be louder to be heard. And then if you're louder, you're called a loud woman, or as Dr. Fumzile was saying, an angry woman. And personally, I think there's nothing wrong with anger. Anger is good for a little bit of anger is good for all of us. Helen, what has been the toughest hurdle for you to cross personally?
Personally?
Yes.
Well, I have been known as a very difficult woman throughout my time. Personally, the biggest barrier, I think it is that when you are very driven and passionate and ambitious, as every woman entrepreneur I've ever met is, that you then are very easily stereotyped as being difficult, as being angry, and then that's an excuse not to listen to you. That's an excuse not to act on the recommendations that you're making. And one of the things that I've seen is a lot of people having these conversations are people that understand and believe in the issues. So I think what we have to overcome in our professional lives is often to talk to people who don't agree with us, and those conversations are uncomfortable. And we are starting this conversation, and we're going to have to take it to some places where it might be uncomfortable to try and create the change that we need to make. In the same way, women entrepreneurs have to have those difficult conversations that Ngozi and Chioma were talking about earlier. And hopefully programs can support them, mentors, access to networks can support them to have those difficult conversations. They also, we are going to be uncomfortable. Standing up against power is uncomfortable. I still find it uncomfortable. I've been doing it for quite a while now, and it continues to be uncomfortable. I'm sure the incredible panelists I'm here have all had those individual journeys, and it is challenging. And sometimes you need to take stock and take a break to build yourself up again. But definitely, you can't give up. I think Hillary said that.
Yeah.
If you give up.
She said, if every time you get knocked down, just get up and keep going. That was the best advice that she could give. And I said to her, and how much does that irritate people that you just keep going, the people who try to put you down. It's time for last comments, and I want to actually end with something a little complex and therefore controversial. Are women-led companies actually different? And I ask this because, Dr. Phumzile, I'll start with you. A lot of us have fought all our lives against essentialism. We don't want to be defined by you're women, so you're this, you're men, so you're this. But equally, there is another school of thought, a millennial school of thought, that would argue that women shouldn't exactly end up aping men. Certainly, we shouldn't end up aping patriarchal cultures. So are women-led, and we know that men and women can both be feminist and men and women can both be misogynistic, and that is the consequence of being socialized by a patriarchal culture. My question in the end to all of you is that, is there something women entrepreneurs in particular need to be more mindful of? Is there something that women-led companies can do for other women in particular? Is there something we can share from our own battles? So I'll start with you, Phumzile, if I may. Dr. Phumzile, are you able to hear me? You're on mute, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Women-owned and women-led companies are attuned to certain realities about women's lives that typical male-dominated companies aren't. Women understand the issue of burden of care, for instance, because many of the women who are leading women would have gone through that themselves. So they can easily identify with a woman worker in their team who is struggling with the issues of care, and would therefore try to consider how the company is run such that women are able to have the possibility to take care of their unpaid care issues. Not all women are like that, but I think a larger number of women are like that. And I would say to women entrepreneurs, please bring that to work with you, because we have had years and years of companies that operate in a world as if women don't exist. If you bring this, and we see more and more companies that take into account the needs that a family have, that men also have as a family, then you can see the policies that women confront at work change over time. And we would end up with workplaces that actually accept many of the things that women need to have in their lives, and indeed men need in their lives, because we also don't want men who are workaholic, who think that the best man at work is the one that stays at work until it's late at night, being underproductive. A man has to do their work and then go home and be a father, be a parent. In that way, they share the burden of care at home. So there is something very important that we have to do that. In generation equality, we established a group of countries that are just looking at this issue of care. I'm looking forward to see what they're going to come up with, what policies they need, what financing they need, and what infrastructure is needed in order to make sure that we bring this to fore. Childcare is the biggest thing that we all need to see in our countries happen in our lifetime and pretty soon.
Yeah. And I hear you, but Amy, do you find that there is a kind of generational and inevitable generational clash in how both men and women view work, life, the balance between those spaces? For a generation of older women who've had to fight very, very, very hard to break the most basic glass ceilings, sometimes the kind of post-feminist discourse is not something that 2 generations or 3 generations of women agree on.
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to respond to your other thing, because your other question, just briefly. Sorry to do that, but
no,
I think it's really important to remember, because I think Dr. Fanzili made a really important point, that it is the responsibility of women who start companies to do it differently. But I think one of the more important or most important or another important factor to remember is that women role modeling in existing companies that are run by men. And I find that the greatest change in the 13 years that I've been in the private sector in a company that's run by men is the women that move the needle, right? If you're going to go home at 6 o'clock because you have to go home, actually the men that work for those women that are in high levels or making change to company policy. And I think that's in general. So I just wanted to say it's not just about women entrepreneurs starting their own companies, but it's also about women actually doing what Dr. Fanzili said at the beginning, which is actually taking a stand on something that's really important. That's how change happens across the board, and I think has exponential impact long-term if it's not just women entrepreneurs. But on the generational question, it's interesting. I have mixed feelings about it. I deal with young entrepreneurs on college campuses, and I think where I don't see change is what I mentioned earlier, is why is it mostly men that are in the launch pads that are going in there to have the courage and the confidence to get a mentor, to write a business plan, and to get access to whatever support systems. Why is it that the women of this next generation, which theoretically should be more confident, more aggressive? And so I think there's something, I'm not sure what it is, that we're not addressing. I really don't know what it is. It's something that we grapple with at the Blackstone Charitable Foundation, is how do we create an environment? Is it around the messaging, which, you were also referencing, Dr. Fanzili, around advertising? How are we advertising the Launchpad? Who are we showing in the advertisements? How are we targeting our outreach to women and other underserved communities on college campuses that you should be in a Launchpad? There are entrepreneurs that look like you. And so I do think, there's more work to be done. I think we've moved the needle a little bit, but not as much as I would have hoped we would have.
Yeah, I hear you. Ngozi, as a female entrepreneur, do you find that yourself mindful of wanting to do things a bit differently in your own organization?
Well, just like I'm listening to everybody. We're all saying the same thing, but you know what? There's always that's in my own field as a manufacturer in a very male-dominated area, because you find all men and just very few women. And then you always told, pitch like pitch like a girl, don't pitch like a girl. So you're giving those kind of, and then like Dr. Punzila said, she said, oh, you're perceived as aggressive. Yes, and then they say, okay, be like a woman, a female, and then be aggressive, and don't be like a man. So again, it's a two-way thing. But for me, tackling gender stereotypes is indeed a shared problem. Relating to entrepreneurship requires, work in multiple areas. A lot has to do with it. education is part of it, media attitude, the individuals, the general entrepreneurial ecosystem, policies, process, practices that interconnect and form the space for the business to operate is really, really, really very important for me. So my take would be that we can each personally make a difference by every individual self-reflecting and identifying the ways in which the gender stereotypes shape your views and practices. Like in my industry, it's very peculiar. It's man. Yeah, I know if you're firm, they find you very arrogant. They find you very, they look at you as in why is she being a man? Why won't she be a woman? Why? There are too many whys. And even for the men, I really must be very fair. Even for the men, why is he being feminine? Why is he coming on? This whole thing is all.
I'm so glad you brought up that second thing, because actually the pressure of patriarchy on men is as insidious, as acute, so often, and also the pressure to be the provider, the economic, the earner. These are all the stereotypes that we have to challenge, and men face them too. Helen, I'm going to give you the last word. These many whys, the fact is that we don't have perfect answers to them. The nurture versus nature debate: are men and women different? How much of it is patriarchy? How much of it is genetics? How much of it is culture? We're never really going to know the answers to this, and all we can hope is to aspire to institutional equality. That's really that when you cut through the clutter, that's what we're all really here to talk about.
Yes, that's right. And it's 268 years apparently until we're going to achieve women's economic empowerment. And I'm sorry, we can't wait that long. So please join with us to continue this conversation and take the actions that you can. There's some suggestions there under the screen with the Cherie Blair Foundation and others like UN Women, Blackstone, women entrepreneurs all around the world, to see if we can create this change together. Thanks a lot, Barker. And thank you to all the panelists.
Thank you. I'm going to say bye-bye, good luck, and thank you. It was lovely hearing all of you across countries, cultures, geographies. It's been wonderful. Encouraging everybody in our audience. There are, I'm told, networking booths that you can slip into, meet people you'd like to talk to, engage, build your contacts, build your networks. Take care and have a great afternoon. Thanks, and thanks for a great conversation. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.